First of all, let me express my thankfulness and also my wobbly knees that I'm experiencing of being included in this symposium few days ago, and I am expected to fill the gap caused by the absence of a party, which I cannot do, so I'm not making any promise. I'm starting within the terror of time and going to say few broad pointers which largely are coming from my understanding of applied psychology in India. And I was also seeing the brochure of the symposium, which clearly says that, and it is important to look at the initial remarks when you are about to celebrate the centennial year. And it is thought as a science to promote applied psychology and to promote communication and interaction among applied psychologists. I think 100 years ago, what notion of science was accepted by the discipline of psychology and how much of that notion of a science has undergone a change in the last 100 years. There is a serious need to re-examine the perspective on the science. Because I am referring to it, it has influenced the growth and development of applied psychology in India, and particularly about its application in the area of organizational behavior and management sciences. I would look, and just to keep the time in track, I will look at the growth in the area of organizational and management. That is what brief I was asked to present. Can be divided in three phases. The first phase, when it began, when some organizational psychologists received their training in the West, and particularly in the Kurt Levin's tradition of a school of action research. And I would particularly refer the name of Professor Uday Parikh, who got his training in the school of Kurt Levin and came back very fresh and found the fertile ground of India in 1947. Just the country has got the independence. And in 1951, the first policy document came under the leadership of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And one of the statements of the preamble of the policy document was, the organizations and industries have to be started in India to bring social transformation, social change. So organizations were not only created to generate wealth and to elevate country from the poverty, they were also seen as a means of bringing social change and social transformation. Now this was also seen as an opportunity by newly trained young psychologists getting their training in the West, but bringing the notion of a particular kind of a science, which in the morning Dr. Loving said it's evidence-based, secular knowledge system. Because if it is not secular, it will not have universal appeal and carries all the probability of being labeled as indigenous. And even today I fail to understand that what are the markers on the basis of which we differentiate universal knowledge system and the indigenous knowledge system. So if any kind of practice, any kind of evidence-based is being done, then which is rooted in its cultural context, does it good enough to be qualified as indigenous knowledge? And if it is a hardcore science-based secular knowledge system, then only it will have a universal appeal. I think this could also be one of the agenda in the Centennial Applied Psychology Conference. So this newly formed, they created an applied behavioral society in 60s with the collaboration of a psychodynamically trained leader, Ralph Linton. And Linton and Uday Parikh both did wonderful work of starting an Indian Society of Applied Psychologists Behavioral, ISAPS, which is a call in short, who undertook the responsibility of training psychologists to practice the knowledge application into this. In the meantime, the Forum of International Applied Psychology Association, the IAAP, has created a task force in 1973. And they had given the responsibility of coming out the skills and competencies which would be necessary for all the psychologists to be labeled as a professional psychologist, to be trained through summer training to the other kinds of things. And in 1973, the report is available into the history of applied psychology. They identified 3 skills, competencies. First, skills in the individual differences, the skill in behavior modifications, and third, the counseling and the guidance skills. And you see, these are the 3 skills which are very unique to the discipline of applied psychology and to the psychology. And if people are getting trained up to certain level by the programs of training and internship and supervised work in applied psychology in these 3 domains, and then take it to the different kinds of areas, and this casted influence on the development of applied psychology in India. Because people were doing assessment, psychological assessment in the organizations and the industry, they were making interventions in bringing about the change, training, and development. The second development came from the academic perspective, where the ISSR surveys, the Indian Council of Social Science Research, created surveys. And the first survey by Shiv K. Mitra, and the second subsequently. And the important turn came when Professor Janak Pandey consecutively consolidated all the work done in the area, and the remaining 2 were done by Professor Girishwar Mishra. Both of them are sitting here, and they can give their views on that. And Professor Janak Pandey, in his book ISR Survey, were consolidating the work done by the Indian psychologists in different areas, different domains. And both these surveys were organized around themes, that these are the themes and areas of psychology and applied psychology that would be done. And in their review, both of them expressed certain amount of dissatisfaction and disenchantment about the level of theorizations related to psychology and applied psychology. Because we were perhaps aiming to achieve the same level of a theorization based on the knowledge, but not realizing that this theorization will remain deficient, keeping in view the notion of a science, evidence-based and secular, that we are trying to achieve. And at the same time crying, at the same time complaining that we have not been able to produce culturally relevant knowledge system to our own society. So the first training coming from there, the country opening up into the other. And the third reason which is being identified, the why it is not done, and that's started happening in the organization when under the leadership of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, the Ministry of Education was named as Ministry of HRD. So a massive initiative by the government was taken for training and development in the organizations. And as the story goes, Prime Minister one day asked his own cabinet secretary that when was the last you got your training? And he said that when I passed out my foundation course 20 years ago. Then said, do you ever realize how much change is taking place across the globe in the country in various administrative and bureaucratic kind of a thing? And the first major initiative of restructuring and reorganizing the Ministry of Education was taken up by the government. And the government renamed the Ministry of Education as Ministry of Human Resource Development, which still continues. And this gave new impetus, new force, and massive budget allocation to the area of training and development in the organizations, in the educational institutions, and to the others. But what it created trouble, and created trouble at 2 levels. And this trouble still continues unless the International Association think of bringing about some kind of a change. Those who are responsible for doing research, creating knowledge and theory building, they are not in the business of practice. And those who are entering into the practice because they see opportunity, they see economic possibilities, probabilities, and means of making bills, they are not continuously hobnobbing and interacting with the people in the academia whom they call people live in ivory towers. Because we are teaching in the universities are often accused, and some of my colleagues who are sitting there, of being conceptual and theoretical and not having enough practical orientation in our life. And this distinction, unfortunately, have casted influence on the growth and development of discipline of applied psychology in India. So many people, because of the opportunity initiated by the government, enter into the field of training, assessment, counseling, and other kind of a thing. And just to give you data, there are 930 career counselors listed on the website of Government of India in the Ministry of Labor and Employment, 930. And I checked with them as a part of the member of their committee that how many of have them got a certificate duly approved by Rehabilitation Council of India, the RCI, the authorized and the recognized body for the certification and authenticity of these associations. And the ministry and the government do not have answer. So one way of looking at that, the quality is a suspect, but the another way of looking at that is a huge opportunity for applied psychologists to come up with this program which will fulfill and cater to the needs of it. The market survey in India clearly suggests that there is a need for 5,000 counselors and therapists every year in this training, and including all the clinical training, RINPAS, IBAHAS, NIMHANS, all such training institutes in psychiatry are hardly producing 800 or 900 MPhils in clinical psychology. This gap is getting fulfilled by those agencies whose quality and credentials are yet to be established by the government bodies. So there is a need that how this can be mobilized to take it up. So people enter into the practice of organizations and others, and the people who remain into the world of academia. There's a very interesting paper written by Ghoshal who says that the challenge of the applied psychology field and the knowledge field is that in the sciences, the knowledge of a theory has no effect on the occurrence of the phenomenon. But in social sciences, there is a huge amount of impact of the knowledge of a theory on the occurrence of phenomena, because the phenomena in the real sciences occur irrespective of the theories that you have had. But in applied and psychological sciences, whatever theoretical knowledge you have, it has influenced the way phenomena will be perceived. How this mutuality and reciprocity and symbiotic relationship between the knowledge and the real phenomena could be negotiated in a manner which delivers the results it promises to deliver. That is where I think the challenge of applied psychologists that takes into account. And finally came the phase of globalization of the effect in the post-90 era, and I could see that a lot of influences, but there was a more of import influence that is coming, and the desire in the Indian psychologists to come out with the knowledge system which will make certain appeal to their Western counterparts or to the whole world into that. And that process, a lot of other things have happened, but the one very serious that has happened, that we have somewhere started losing contact. And I could see its result coming in Arab Spring and the nationalism as a political party coming into beat. It is perhaps another quest to reclaim the cultural and the other kinds of a ground which we seems to have lost under the influence of globalization. So I see a new discourse, a new narrative coming into it when we are trying to do culturally relevant, or in other terms, the indigenous kind of a psychology in this country. So looking into three phases, this development taking place in the applied psychology, and it's been very well documented in the reviews done by Indian Council of Social Science projects, and this tells that the trend can be seen. But if the processes and the theoretical force structure is to be discovered, I think there is also need to subject these documents for some kind of a meta-analysis for arriving at a theories which would be more culturally relevant. Sir is getting restless, and I know my time is up, and I don't want to overstep the time boundaries. I know that it is very recently thought and reflected about these particular points. Just two suggestions: if your next meet 2020, if you are going to say, and one of the learning points I would be interested in looking from that symposium and other, that if some kind of a task force could be created by International Association of Applied Psychology to identify skills and competencies, which, and this can be taken as a form of some kind of advocacy, which should be essential and necessary for you to acquire the prestigious label of applied psychology. If I'm working in any field in that matter, all psychology is applied. But if certain kind of a competencies which are recognized, identified, and certain processes are clearly mentioned that these processes would be necessary for you to be applied psychologist, I think this will have a much more seminal effect on the way applied psychology is practiced subsequently. Because we did that in South Campus, as sir has mentioned, Pandey, and it brought tremendous results. I remember, because that was also time Indian economy was opening up, most of our students in the OB area and management, organizational behavior area, had a job placements, and they were fairly respected, and most of them they were negotiating for another job when I, as head of the department, has to issue the instruction that if you have one job, you will not sit the placement interview again. But as the data, it shows that how we have been able to establish our own sense of relevance with the community, with the society, and with the industry and organizations. So there is a possibility that I see, and I request the organizers of the next symposium to take it up as an agenda. I am thankful, sir, Mr. Pandey, for reposing his confidence that I would be able to do something in the last moment, and that is what I have tried. Thank you very much.